So 2000, mid 2012, 2013, 2014, we're super active back in the church. Well, sorry, should say super active. We were attending, we were serving as we could, and our kids were all active. Um, things, and I stopped meeting with President Jensen at some point. So several things happened in the meantime that were kind of important. Um, during this time, I interviewed Tom Phillips, the former stake president from the United Kingdom, who had a second anointing, and he talked a lot about his unpleasant interactions with Elder Holland. That struck me. Hans Mattson, in 2013, I interviewed him on Mormon Stories, and he came out in the New York Times, and that really opened up the discussion about faith crises. That was an important thing that was going on. And what was kind of really troubling was in October of 2013, Elder Dehlin H. Oaks gave a talk called No Other Gods. And it was just a really disturbing talk. One of the many talks where he doubles down on his LGBTQ rhetoric and his anti kind of homophobic stuff. And as I was doing my dissertation on same-sex attraction, LGBTQ Mormons, as I was a counselor in the counseling center at Utah State University, and seeing how many people were struggling over faith crisis issues, porn and masturbation issues, the guilt and the shame that the church heaped on people, and the suicidality of LGBTQ Mormons, I became just more and more upset and concerned about the church's policies related to LGBTQ youth. And then what happened was I was invited by Utah State University to give a TED Talk. And so in November of 2013, I gave a TED Talk at Utah State University, probably one of the first Mormon TED Talks ever. And I gave it basically making the argument that Mormons should support same-sex marriage, and that LGBTQ people should be allowed to fall in love and get married. And I felt like that was risky to do that, but the more and more I was subjected to LGBTQ suicides and depression, divorce, the more my research bore out that celibacy doesn't work for LGBTQ people, mixed orientation marriages don't work for LGBTQ people, and the church was just really harming people. That's when I just said I can't just stay active in the church, get all the benefits from the church when I knew that the church was causing people some significant harm. So I gave that TED Talk, and then a little bit later, the women, ordained women, really invited me to write a paragraph, kind of a statement in support of ordained women. And I think I did that in the December timeframe. And maybe some other things are kind of worth noting. It's probably worth noting that between that time and January of 2014, Mark Jensen was released as stake president, and Bishop Stephenson was released as bishop. I've heard rumors that one of the reasons Mark Jensen was released early as stake president, I believe he had served 9 years, not quite the 10, was that he refused to excommunicate me. Now, I don't have direct evidence of that, but I've heard suggestions of that. They swapped out Bishop Stephenson as well. And then I started hearing that Elder Ballard, along with L. Whitney Clayton, general authorities for the church, were going around training, bishoprics and stake presidencies on how to deal with apostates. Ordained women was raging by this point, and so and then L. Whitney Clayton came to our stake a couple times, the North Logan stake. He even gave a talk at a stake conference that I attended. And it was all that kind of stay in the boat rhetoric and that sort of thing. And I firmly believe that L. Whitney Clayton came to our stake, released Jensen because he wouldn't excommunicate me, and put in Brian King, an orthopedic surgeon in Cache Valley, who I think L. Whitney Clayton and Ballard believed would excommunicate me. So all that kind of happened. I didn't hear from President Jensen. And so I gave my TED Talk in November, signed the Ordained Women, wrote my Ordained Women letter in December of 2013. And then sure enough, in late January of 2014, I got called in by my new bishop, Brian Hunt. Brian Hunt had been Elders Quorum president when I taught in Elders Quorum. Nice guy, kind of a smart guy, simple guy, not necessarily one who would study the church history. But he was very loving at the time he was called as Elders Quorum president. And I remember him even telling me he had a gay brother and that he was going to support his brother. And I really thought that having him be bishop would be like this huge kind of blessing to the ward and to me. It made me feel like I would be safe. But that's not what happened. So I guess the next step in my journey, again, I did baptize my son. I was told I was worthy in every way. And my beliefs hadn't changed since 2001. You know what I mean? It's not like President Jensen rehabilitated my beliefs. I never lied and told him, yes, now I believe in an anthropomorphic God. And yes, now I believe in a literal atonement. And yes, now I believe it's the one true church. Like none of that ever happened. He didn't, and that wasn't a condition of me allowing, being able to baptize my son. It's just basically that we spent enough time together where he could see my heart and he cared about me and let me baptize Winston. So fast forward to January of 2014, and I get notified by my new bishop, Brian Hunt, that I'm supposed to come in and talk to him. And I was kind of scared. I didn't know why I was meeting with him, but I decided I would, and I knew that and so I went. And so now what you're about to hear is my interview with Brian Hunt, where he is going to tell me that he's going to initiate yet another investigation on me. And this is the final bishop investigation that kicked off ultimately the disciplinary council and my excommunication. So I kind of shared the past interviews to just kind of give some context to the other conversations you're about to hear, but also to show you how loving Bishop Jensen was, and to kind of show you a good example of how priesthood leaders can respond to people in faith crisis. I think overall, Bishop Jensen did a great job, and he was really loving, and I appreciate it, or Stake President Jensen. So here's where things go wrong. And now I'll share that with you guys, and I hope you enjoy or value or appreciate this conversation. It's January 26, 2014, and I am talking to my new bishop, Brian Hunt. So here goes.
Thanks for coming to see me.
My pleasure.
I guess there's just a couple things I wanted to review with you and kind of get an understanding as to where things were and where things are, what's going on with John Dehlin, I guess.
Okay.
And I preface that a little bit. I know when I was called as bishop, you were meeting very regularly with President Jensen and had been for quite some time. And, I had a nice visit with you and your wife for one day, and didn't really reach out a lot because I knew you'd been meeting with President Jensen. But I guess honestly, John, in I think it was November, Winston poked and prodded and said, "Dad, why don't you go bear your testimony?" And you stood up and you bore your testimony. And I was concerned with the lack of you bore testimony of things which are meaningful and important, but there weren't some of the core things of the gospel, which, as I understand some of your conversations with President Jensen, are some things that, maybe are I don't want to say a struggle, but there have been some interesting thought processes and discussions and so on and so forth there. And I'm not familiar with any of the particulars associated with those things. But as I listened to you share your testimony, I just felt it would be good to visit with you a little bit and talk about where you are, what's going on. And then with tithing settlement, things being so busy in November and December, it's now in January, and just getting around to that. So I guess, where are you with your testimony? Where's John Dehlin's, comfort level place? How do you feel you fit in with the church?
Well, I guess there's things that I know and things that I believe, and then there's things that I hope for. And if we're talking about belief, and the stuff that I know is around, like, I think somewhere in the scriptures it says, if you have not charity, you are nothing. So I think charity is Christ-like love, service. I think that's at the center of my testimony. And I think everything else kind of pales in comparison to that. I believe in faith and repentance and the law of chastity, word of wisdom, Sabbath day. I believe in most of the commandments, pretty much all of them. I can't think of a commandment I don't believe in, really. So those are important parts of my belief and behavior. Emphasis on family is super important. And then, I think the thing I always, I just don't. I think people in the church have different comfort levels with being able to say I know or knowledge. Mm-hmm. And I think any material claim, any claim that has to do with an actual someone who's dead or historical stuff, or that stuff's just stuff that it was really important to me. It used to be really important to me finding out what was true and not. And it got really confusing for me, So I guess I've lowered the importance of that kind of stuff for me. And that's where I think the hope, belief or hope comes in. Like I don't know for sure that there's a God, but I believe there is, I don't know for sure that there's an afterlife, but I hope there is. And I don't know for sure that, Jesus was resurrected, and I don't know that for sure, but I hope it's true. But I'm going to live the gospel as I understand it, as if those things are all true. And I won't feel bad or cheated if they turn out not to be true. I think I will have lived a happier life. And if they turn out to be true, that's even better. And that's how I understand faith is. And I don't sit in judgment of those who characterize their beliefs in terms of knowledge. I don't like think in my mind they're lying or wrong or deceiving people. It could be that they're just using the word no for what I say belief. It could be they've got something I don't. It's not like I haven't tried to know. I feel like I've tried really, really hard. So I guess I have to be at peace with what I've been given and live according to the most central things. I have no problem believing that Joseph Smith received inspiration, and I have no problem believing that the leaders of the church have the keys to lead the church. So I don't have any problems with that aspect of the restoration. So there's no problems for me. I don't see any big. I don't have any there's nothing that I'm angry at the church about or So I think I'm aware that may come across as weak or feeble to a lot of people. And sometimes I console myself by saying, there are people who, I think Christ said that, blessed are those who know, but, maybe even more blessed are those who don't know, but still do their best to follow. And I hope that offering is ultimately going to be found acceptable, that I don't have a knowledge of things, but I'm still willing to try and live a good life. So there's my summary.
I appreciate that. I know from discussions from many years ago when I was the Elders Quorum president and you were an Elders Quorum instructor, there were some, I don't want to say questions as to testimony, but there were some things that were maybe a little bit difficult for you to teach about with regards to, say, Joseph Smith and some of those things, because there was I'm not an eloquent speaker, I'm not an eloquent thinker, I bumble my way through a lot of these things, so
me too.
Forgive me with that. But Elder Holland last April, I very much appreciated his talk on testimony that he gave when he talks about having a desire to believe, and a true desire is an important and very first step. I've perceived and understood as I've listened to you in a couple of different settings that the wholesomeness of the church, what the church provides as far as family, or things that are very important to you. You see a lot of good that comes from that. If you will, maybe the fruits of the church are some things which are meaningful and important because there's things that you identify with that are meaningful as far as raising a family, as far as being good people, and so on and so forth. And so, I appreciated what Elder Holland said as he talks about a 14-year-old boy who recently, as I quote recently, said, "Brother Holland, I can't say yet that I know the church is true, but I believe it is." I hugged that boy until his eyes bulged out. I told him over in my soul that belief is a precious word, even a more precious act. He need never apologize for only believing. And quoted Christ as saying, "Be not afraid, only believe." And I think there's a lot of people, that's what they are. It is a belief. And hopefully it's a desire to believe and a desire to help that to grow into more. Faith is, seeking after something that's not known. There's a certain amount of unknown that's required for faith to really be what it is. And as I stand up as a bishop and bear my testimony and say that I know this to be the case, how much of it's true knowledge? Have I seen God the Father and Jesus Christ as Joseph Smith did? No, I haven't. Have I seen and felt the influence of the Holy Ghost? And enough things happen in a way that help me to say that I can know, yes, that's very much where I find myself. And as I may have doubts or start to struggle, I come back to those situations where I can feel of and know of that presence and know I was guided such that it helps me to understand that there's a Heavenly Father who is a real and tangible person who can help me. So there are definitely different levels that are associated with with what different people identify as a testimony. Because a young child stands up and says that I know this, in his mind and where he is that different than an adult that stands up and says the same thing, or a teenager that does, or one of the apostles who stands behind the pulpit and says things. There's varying different levels that are associated with what I think you and I would both term to be knowledge, if you will. So, understanding a little bit more, which that's beneficial, that's helpful. I will tell you that I'm also concerned, John, with some of the online presence that is there and some of the things that you propose and say to the world in general, as you will, and some of those comments with regards to who the church is, what the church is, and what the church's policies and processes are. Again, I do not know at what level and what length you visited and talked about some of those things with President Jensen, but there's some things there that are things that you've written or things you've interviewed which are of a concern to me, because they lead, in my opinion, sometimes to more questions and more doubt than to seeking for truth.
Are these things you've collected or that other people have given you?
Well, there are some things that I have looked at on Mormon Stories or on some of the other websites, some things from some Facebook posts. I will tell you, I am not actively on the internet all the time looking and following. There are some snippets of things that others have forwarded to me. There's some things that I've identified and read and looked at as myself on my own as well.
The stake president?
No. President Jensen and I talked briefly on a few things, but I think he did forward me one link shortly after I was called as bishop to things. But I do know from talking to President Jensen, there were some things that were very positive that you posted, as well as some of the things that I do think lead people to question what they really truly think is important to them, if you will. I believe, again, trying to be careful with words, that you find that the things that you post there can be very beneficial to people. I think you find, I guess I shouldn't say, what's your motive? What's the intent? What are you hoping to accomplish with some of what you put out there online?
Do you have any examples?
Let me see. I'm terrible at the specifics.
No, it's just helpful to talk about specifics.
For instance, there was an article I read a short time ago about progressive Mormons. And also one that I looked at regarding women in the priesthood, and that we'd be a better place if we gave the priesthood to women in the church.
Okay. So what's the motivation behind progressive Mormons? So let's just say that a conservative Mormon might be Bruce R. McConkie. Okay? Bruce R. McConkie taught that the reason why blacks were black was because they were less valued in pre-existence. Okay? Taught that. The church has since denounced that teaching and said that and he himself denounced that teaching and said, I was wrong. Right? And obviously the priesthood was ultimately given to blacks. Even though many apostles said it would not ever be given to blacks. It was given to blacks. There are lots of issues that the church was, many of the apostles opposed the civil rights movement. As Stephenson said, it was a communist conspiracy to overthrow the United States while he was an apostle. there were people during the time, members of the church during the 60s, that said, no, the civil rights movement is trying to give freedom and allow blacks to vote. And they disagreed with the apostles. Sometimes they even got punished for disagreeing, even though 20 or 30 years later they were vindicated because the church ended up denouncing what was taught in the 60s, right? So there's a lot of people who are more liberal in the church, and they feel like, what time do you have to go?
I think I have a home teaching appointment a little after 6, I believe. But,
okay. My
son has not, no, I'm sorry. 5:15 is what time I'm supposed to be done.
So there are people who feel like they either have to believe the very conservative Orthodox perspectives, polygamy. There are people who say, I can't believe that I'm going to be practicing polygamy in the year after. I don't believe it. They read D&C 132 and they say, it says that a man can be given 10 virgins. I don't believe that. I don't believe that that's God's way, right? And sometimes people get caught in this position of feeling like you either have to believe the stuff that feels wrong, spiritually wrong to you, or you have to just leave Mormonism altogether. So the purpose behind progressive Mormonism is to say, actually, you can be liberal and progressive and still be Mormon. It's an identity. It's not a movement. There's no membership. It's just an attempt to say, no, there's conservative Mormons and there's liberal Mormons. And, you know, I know that same-sex attraction, homosexuality, LGBT kind of issues are a polarizing issue today. If you were to look 30 years ago, the church was telling people to keep it secret, to go ahead and get married heterosexually even if you're gay, not to tell your spouse. This is what the church leaders did. So thousands of gay and lesbian Mormons went and got married heterosexually. And then those, 80% of those marriages ended in divorce, awful infidelity, families split apart. Well, guess what? Now the church says that's not the way that you should handle being gay or lesbian, right? Church used to have the position that it was a sin to be gay. Well, now they've changed. And now their position is it's not a sin to have same-sex attraction. It's just a matter of how you behave. That's a big change. The church used to try to encourage people to change their sexual orientation, to go to a psychotherapist and to try and make that go away. They now say that you shouldn't, that those efforts oftentimes are damaging, and that's not necessarily the way to go. And they're not supporting the groups anymore who encourage that, when they used to give them money. So I feel like I'm being led by the Spirit in the things that I kind of believe and do. And so that's progressive Mormon. It's just a way to have people not have to abandon their Mormonism and to know that you can be progressive and liberal and still Mormon. What was the second one? Ordained women. So did you know that women used to put their hands on people's head to give them blessings of healing? Probably from 1840 into the early 1900s. You can find quotes where Brigham Young actually speaks to the Relief Society and chastises the women for not exercising their priesthood, for not laying their hands on head and using their gifts of healing. It's a tradition that Joseph Smith started, that Brigham Young carried forward, and that existed in the church for about 100 years. And there's nothing we believe in continuing revelation. Women weren't allowed to pray in General Conference, and just a year ago, for the first time, they were allowed to pray. True?
I can't say that I don't. Can't say I know they weren't allowed to previously. I can say that I haven't remembered seeing one pray.
Yeah, as far as I know, there's little to no record of women praying before last year. So ordained women is not saying the church is in apostasy. It's not saying that. It's not even saying we're telling the brethren what they need to do. It's simply saying we think that the church might be better off if someday they pray and receive the revelation that women can share in the priesthood. So it's just a hope, really. But it's not calling the prophet into apostasy. It's not demanding anything. It's just saying, hey, just like all the people that prayed and asked the prophet to pray about blacks in the priesthood, decades of time went by, and people were saying, please pray about this, please reconsider it, please see if God has continuing guidance. And eventually he did. And ordained women's the same type of thing. It's just saying, hey, pray about it. So that's the spirit behind it. I'm not mad at the church. It's just my belief, my hope, really.
Well, and as your bishop, as an individual, I don't have any issue with you having beliefs that may be different than mine or different than other people's. How that belief may affect other people is then where I become concerned. As it talks about in, I think it's Alma, and again, understanding a little bit more what to you is important, what to you is something that you truly believe. If the Book of Mormon isn't something that you truly believe, then it's difficult for me to say to the Book of Mormon, well, John, I'm reading this and this. The Book of Mormon is concerning to me with what I see. I'm not sure how what that means to you.
I believe there's truth in the Book of Mormon.
Truth, not necessarily that the entire Book of Mormon is true or that it was translated by Joseph Smith by the power of God and is God's Word.
You're asking me?
I guess I'm asking. Yeah, I guess I am. I'm asking.
I don't understand how the Book of Mormon came to be, but I'm willing to accept the truth in it. Again, that's where we get to the material stuff.
Mm-hmm. Understood.
And I don't base my testimony on history or material things. So if you want to talk about a specific truth in the Book of Mormon, that's...
No, not necessarily. And Isaiah indicates that in this day and age, it's a marvelous work and a wonder. Not necessarily a marvelous work as in, oh, wow. It's that it's a work that people will marvel about and wonder about. That God does not intend for this to be clear-cut and dried, and I can go back and find the historical research that's going to prove everything is what it is. Hence, no need for faith. Mm-hmm. That for those who truly find that truth, seeking inspiration from above is the true answer and the place to go to get that. And that there has to be a level of an exertion of faith and trust to get there, that we can be led astray, so to speak. And where I am and where I'm concerned is in Alma 5, verses 57 to 60. And it says, and now I say unto you, all that are desirous to follow the voice of the good shepherd, come ye out from the wicked, and be ye separate, and touch not their unclean things. And behold, their names shall be blotted out, that the names of the wicked shall not be numbered among the names of the righteous, that the word of God may be fulfilled, which saith, the names of the wicked shall not be mingled with the names of my people, but the names of the righteous shall be written in the book of life, and unto them will I grant an inheritance at my right hand. And now, my brethren, what have ye to say against this. I say unto you, if ye speak against it, it matters not, for the word of God must be fulfilled. For what shepherd is there among you, having many sheep, that will watch over them, that wolves entereth not and devour his flock? And behold, if a wolf enter his flock, and doth he not drive him out? Yea, and at last, if he can, will he destroy him. And now I say unto you that the good shepherd doth call after you, and if you will hearken unto his voice, he will bring you into his fold, and ye are his sheep. And he that commandeth you, that ye suffer no ravenous wolf enter among you, that ye may not be destroyed. There's a lot in that. Many different ways that I can look at that and think about it. I've been asked to be the shepherd of this little flock. And I need to make sure that I protect this little flock as best as I can, and that I reach out to those who I feel may have strayed. I want to know in what ways can I reach out to John and help John. And at the same time, I need to make sure that is John a wolf or is John a sheep? Is John helping the flock and keeping together, or is there an intent or an opportunity to deceive and to tear down? I don't know that I know that answer right now, but I know it's something that as I've pondered and thought and considered that I'm concerned about. No criticisms at all about John wondering and questioning what John truly believes, but definitely concerned if in an open and public forum, and as that is expressed, that it may cause others to step away or to lose the faith that they may have.
Does that happen?
I don't know that I can say that it has, but I'll tell you that it's something that as I have been thinking about and thinking about, that I'm concerned about. The church does not, and I think my instructions have been fairly clear from the handbook. I'm not a private investigator. There's not an investigative unit. You don't go out and you try to track things down and follow after things. That's not what my intent would be. I can't say that I've heard for certain from, I've not had a bishop call me and say so-and-so's left the church and they attribute it to conversations with Brother Dehlin. I can't speak to a prior bishop or the prior stake president or any other of those discussions, if you will. All I know is the very short time that I've been here.
All I can say is my beliefs haven't changed since my times with President Jensen, and he was fine with my beliefs, and he allowed me to baptize Winston and allowed me to be in full fellowship. There's zero in my beliefs that have changed between now and then. So I'd be confused if he felt inspired to tell me things were okay and yet you're feeling something different. That'd be really confusing.
No, I understand that, and it is something that I probably need a little more introspection on and a little more seeking for guidance on myself. I can't speak for President Jensen. He is the man who is leading me, and now President King is in that position, and that's who I've gone to President Jensen and gone to President King a number of times as I'm looking for direction and seeking for help. I need to do some more research on my side of things. And see where I think we are.
Okay. Is there a specific belief or teaching then that is of concern to you?
Again, John, I have not researched a tremendous amount. I know that from my discussions with President Allen, you and he have probably disagreed on a number of different things, and he's visited with me a little bit on some of the things that have been of concern to him, but I myself have not researched into one thing one way or the other. I know that there was a point in time where you were fairly active and involved in priesthood meeting, and that's something where you don't feel like you're real comfortable or maybe even welcome there, if you will. unfortunate that they wouldn't feel welcome there. And if that's something that others are doing that make it that way, I find that that's unfortunate as well.
Well, I don't blame anybody, but yeah, Stan and Tyler Ruff have kind of not made me feel very comfortable. Because they've attacked me for my beliefs and positions, and even given lessons where I was there that were very clearly directed right at me in very kind of shaming and embarrassing ways. So I don't want to go to Elders Quorum and be shamed and embarrassed, and I don't want to cause problems and fight with them and go tattle with the bishop. But they were aggressive towards me. I didn't come after them. They came after me, and it's just not constructive. I'm certainly not going to argue with them during Elders Quorum and try and defend myself, and I think that would just be disruptive. So yeah, that was sad. I really enjoyed going, but so I'm not offended though. Sometimes that's a stereotype that we put on people. I'm not offended. I still come to sacrament meeting, but if I feel like I'm not welcome or respected, then it just doesn't feel constructive for either party for me to go. And it's nothing that I said in Elders Quorum. It's stuff outside of Elders Quorum. So you can initiate a church court against me. You can kick that process off. Let me finish. You can kick that process off if you want. Stake president get involved. That's fine. It's your right. It is your privilege. It's your responsibility. Same with the stake president. Is that potentially where you're going with this? Is that in your mind a possibility?
It's definitely in my mind a possibility. It's not that I have an intention and that's where I'm going.
So in your mind, you're not gathering data for that intent? Okay. Because all I can say is I've met with Elder Holland. I've met with Marlon Jensen, former church historian, member of the first president, Mormon Quorum of the 70. I've met with a lot of people, right?
Okay.
And these feelings that I have, and these questions that I have, and these doubts that I have, they're not going to go away. They're doubts that any thinking member either has or is going to have as information becomes more and more rather available. I'm not, it would be easy for me to take offense at you reading that scripture, which alleges indirectly that I'm a wolf in the flock. I can understand how you might be contemplating that perspective. What I would tell you is that pick any doubt or question that I have. It's a legitimate doubt or question. And just like somebody 30 years ago, just like someone 100 years ago might say to the prophet, I'm not sure this polygamy thing is the right way for the church to go. And it ends up that the church backs away from polygamy. Or just like Joseph Fielding Smith denounces evolution and denies that dinosaurs even lived on the planet and that there was death before the fall. And there were apostles who disagreed with him even then. And someone might have stood up and said, I think evolution might be true, and I think there might have been dinosaurs who walked the earth, and I think you might have been wrong, President Joseph Fielding Smith. History vindicated those people. Because now the church has no position, and you can absolutely be a BYU biology professor, teach evolution, and be in complete good standing. Right? And so it may be that I take positions as an informed person on issues that seem scary to you, or even counter to the church's teachings. But I'll just tell you, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of people like me. And if you go after and remove people like me from the church, or if you send a message to the world that people with doubts like mine aren't welcome here, which to me feels like the opposite of what President Uchtdorf's message was in the last General Conference, right? Then you, that's a significant decision, because you're not just kicking me out of the church. There are thousands of other people who are going to say, we're not welcome here. They don't want people like me here. And you're impacting generations and generations of people that might otherwise say there's room. And most importantly, there are people whose views in 10 or 20 years very well might be vindicated by changes that the church makes in the future. So I hate feeling like I'm not welcome here. I hate being accused of being a wolf. I'm raising my kids in this church. I'm letting them attend in spite of my doubts, and I'm supporting them in that. I'm doing my best to not be, find anyone in this ward, find me anyone who feels like I have been proselytizing my beliefs to them, trying to sow doubts to them. The stuff that happened with Stanton and Tyler was them coming into my spheres of community. It was not me going to them saying, hey, let me sow a doubt or a fear. And, it just makes me really sad and uncomfortable when, as much as I'm trying, as hard as I'm working to make it work, while still having integrity for my beliefs, I'm cast as a wolf. So, just had to tell you my feelings on that.
Well, and I appreciate sharing your feelings with me. I appreciate your openness with not taking offense or being able to be offended or so on and so forth. And that perception very much is there, and it's not my intent to offend. It's also not my intent to sidestep an issue if I feel there's an issue. I will tell you that I'm not the one who would initiate a church court. Any Melchizedek priesthood that's initiated on a stake level. There will be some input from me, and there may be a request of me for information, but those things are not necessarily mine. If I have a concern, or if someone comes to me and says, I've committed a sin, I'm confessing, then that may be the prompting for an initiation of those, as I understand it from the handbook. I will also tell you, John, I'm not an extremely learned individual. I think I'm fairly bright, but I'm not one who recalls information. I'm nowhere near the intellect that you are. I've not been through anywhere near the schooling, and that's not the type of person that I choose to be or want to be, if you will. I have not done nearly the level of research on some of the topics that you have, because that's not where I felt prompted or impressed or that I needed to go. Do I understand there's some dirty laundry, if you will, out there with the church? Yeah, most definitely I do. Do I understand that we're men here on the earth and we're not perfect, as Elder Holland said a year ago, April? Most definitely I understand that. I understand I'm not going to make every decision correctly. I'm going to do the best that I can do based on the information I have and what I feel is the inspiration that I'm given. Where that may lead, I can't tell you that I know that. I can tell you that there's definitely never been anybody who's addicted and said, Bishop Hunt, you need to go visit with Brother Dehlin, and this isn't right. That's not where this is coming from. Whether you've had discussions with apostles or others in the church or things that I'm not aware of and haven't been privy to, that's not where I am.
I only tell you that to let you know that I've asked them my questions, and they've acknowledged that they're legitimate. And the church is now, just a tiny bit of history. About 5 years ago, a former Area Authority 70 from Sweden lost his testimony in the church. So he'd been in the third quorum of the 70, lost his testimony. He was troubled by a lot of the same issues that I've had. So he arranged for a meeting with Marlon Jensen in New York to try and talk about these issues. And he asked me to prepare a survey to distribute to people who have left the church to understand what the main reasons were for why people were leaving the church. So a survey was administered to over 3,000 people who have left the church. And we aggregated together for Marlon Jensen all the reasons why people say they left. President Jensen was so grateful for the information from that survey that several months later he asked us to present our findings at church headquarters to the head of CES, to the head of seminary, the church curriculum, to the head of the missionary department, to the head of PR. 2 apostles were involved, and they were super grateful for the research that we did. As a result of that and other things, the church is now starting to publish on its own website official responses to the top issues that we helped identify. And so I don't know if you've seen over the past 6 months, but they put out one on the first vision, addressing the multiple versions of the first vision. They put out about the translation of the Book of Mormon and Joseph using the stone in the hat is the way that he translated the Book of Mormon. And they put out one on blacks in the priesthood where they denounced the teachings of Bruce R. McConkie and Brigham Young. And they're slowly starting to come clean on these issues and to publish official responses. And more is going to come. And so I'm just telling you, you can call me a wolf in sheep's clothing, but the church has been asking me to help them indirectly figure out how to deal with these issues. Because Marlon Jensen said, while he was at Utah State University, that the church is experiencing its greatest apostasy since the time of Kirtland. And it's not because of me. It's because the historical issues and the scientific issues are fair and reasonable concerns that people have. They're credible concerns. They don't prove the church is false. But there's significant enough challenges that if the church doesn't come up with good reasons or explanations for them, it makes people say the church isn't what it claims to be. So I just give you that information to know that I've been trying to help. I've been trying to be a constructive part of the answer.
I appreciate the information.
And the questions are scary. So Stanton's scared or Tyler's scared, right? Because it's unsettling. But I didn't make up the questions. I didn't make up the information. I just learned about it and have been trying to talk about it. Because if we don't talk about stuff, then how do we find answers? If we don't even know the questions, and if we don't spend time trying to solve the problems, they just become like that gorilla in the basement that nobody wants to talk about. So, just wanted to share with you that perspective.
I appreciate that. Again, by no means is this Brian having an assault on John Dehlin or saying, you know, I have issues. I think you're a great individual. I think you've got a great family. I have some concerns. Yeah, I have some concerns. Are my concerns founded? I don't know. I definitely don't profess to know all the answers and even a lot of the questions, if you will. I know where my faith leads me to believe. I know what actions that I take because of that. I truly believe that I've been asked to sit in this chair for a reason, and there's good that I can do while I'm here. I I've seen God's hand in that over just the last 6 months that I've interacted with and worked with some of my members of our ward. What that opportunity may bring for you and I in the future, I don't know. That's where I'm at.
Okay. So the purpose of this meeting was for you to express your concerns and what?
Well, A, I want to understand more of where you were. B, I want to let you know that I am concerned. That I'm not sure what level that concern is or what actions my concern may or may not bring. There's no eminent, I made up my mind, this is what I think and where we are. I need to learn and understand and seek direction from our Heavenly Father as to what I feel like I need to do and how best I move forward. And would tell you that most likely I'm going to ask you to come in and see me again. This isn't just a one-time thing because I need to learn as I move forward. I'll walk back up from that.
Any idea when?
I have no timetable on anything, and it's something again, I have no directive. I don't have something that I'm saying this is my goal and where I am. It's a concern I've had for a while. It's taken me a number of months to make things happen such that we would have had, the first minute. And again, I need to seek some counsel from President King and seek some direction from him as well. I can tell you that the direction I've been giving everyone I've talked with, they come in with questions and problems, is that my answer is that our answers come from our Heavenly Father, our answers come from the Spirit, and that's what we seek and look and go for those answers. That we can collaborate and we can talk about it and we can learn good things on our peer level, on the level that we are, but our answers are going to come from the man upstairs. And I firmly believe that's the case, and I believe that's where my answers have come from and will continue to come from. That as I communicate with and talk with and visit with my peers, it helps me with a broader information base and a maybe broader basis to consider and think about. But my answers come from Heavenly Father through the Holy Ghost. And I believe that very strongly. Oh, wow. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
But thank you for coming to see me.
Thanks, Bishop.
Thank you for bringing me on. I'll keep you posted.
Okay.
If I've got questions, I'll reach out and let you know what questions I have.
Okay.
So, by no means am I have an agenda or I have a place that I'm trying to get to. I need to understand more.
Okay.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey everyone. So that was my interview with Brian Hunt, my third bishop while I was in the North Logan, in my North Logan ward. And a couple things to me were interesting. Sorry if that was hard to hear for some of you. So one of the weird dances that was played during my excommunication, and something that has been true, if you go back to the September 6th excommunications, it turns out that Boyd K. Packer was directly sending Malcolm Jepson to go tell stake presidents to excommunicate the September 6th. And so it was very much a top-down thing. But that was something that a lot of people were troubled about. And so the church learned that even if it wanted to orchestrate disciplinary councils, that it needed to find a way to kind of make it seem like a local action, even if it was still orchestrated from above. And so since the September 6th, you've had the church always wanting to keep the handprints from above off the dirty work down below. Mountain Meadows Massacre comes to mind as well, where Brigham Young may have been creating this environment for violence, but then John D. Lee is the scapegoat. I think the church has always wanted to have it be something where the local leaders are ultimately blamed for these decisions, and there's no fingerprints on the higher ups in the church. And so one of the things that was weird to me about this interview with Brian Hunt is he had just been put in as bishop. I had known that Ballard and L. Whitney Clayton were running around the country trying to get Kate Community, pressuring the stake president of Kate Kelly or the bishop of Kate Kelly to excommunicate her. They had also pressured the stake president of Denver Snuffer to excommunicate him. He was the CEO of New Skin at the time, Truman Hunt, I think was his name. And he was doing that with me. And again, he had kicked out my former stake president, my former bishop, put in the new stake president, new bishop, and had training in my ward or stake to go after and get the apostates. And I think this is when that bubble graph was used. If you guys have seen that kind of bubble graph where it lists me as one of the great enemies of the church, I even suspect that was used to kind of show my stake president and bishop that the church thought of me as an enemy. But having said all that, here is Brian Hunt calling me in, saying on the one hand, he has no directive, but then on the other hand, he's saying he hadn't really looked at my stuff much. He hadn't really done any research. He didn't really know what it's all about. And he didn't seem super informed. Another thing that was super weird about this that I mentioned before is that we had a home teacher who lived down the road. He's a dentist named Stanton Allen. And Stanton was our home teacher, and he was secretly investigating us and gathering information to turn into the bishop and stake president about us. There was also a USU professor on our street named Tyler Bruff, and he was doing the same types of things. And these were two guys who just felt like it was their job to kind of like spiritual Danites to kind of chase the wolves out from the sheep. And that was hard because I cared about these guys. They had been my friends. I trusted them. And they were secretly investigating me and turning evidence into the church leaders behind my back. It felt very much, again, like the KGB or whatever. So it was just this weird charged dynamic. I personally don't believe for a second that Brian Hunt was just doing this just of his own volition with no mandate. I believe his stake president was called to do this job. He had a directive, and I believe that Brian Hunt got training that led him to feel like he needed to investigate me. And so that kicked off an investigation. A couple other things. I thought it was weird that he kept talking about me in third person. He kept saying John Dehlin while I was in the room. I thought that was weird. And just to talk about the history a little bit, I had met twice with Elder Holland. I had met previously with Marlon Jensen, the general authority over church history, the church historian. I even have a recording of that conversation that I haven't released. Someday I will, perhaps. But this all tied back to the Hans Mattsson disaffection, who is an Area Authority 70 from Sweden. He listened to Mormon stories. He lost his faith along with a lot of other Swedes. They did the whole Swedish rescue. And then Hans went to Marlon Jensen, who he had worked with in Europe, and said, I want to meet with John Dehlin and you and a friend of mine. And we want to have a talk about why people are leaving the church. And so I gathered a bunch of researchers, and we surveyed thousands of internet Mormons who had left the church, and we did a whole analysis and shared it with the church. And ultimately this content was shared with Marlon Jensen, and then he asked us to wait to release it. And then ultimately he had a friend of mine, Travis Stratford, go to church headquarters and present all our findings to Elder Cook and all the several managing directors at the church. And a lot of this information was used by Elder Jensen to convince the brethren to allow or permit or to go forward with the Gospel Topics Essays program. So I'd been doing all this work to help the church at church headquarters, and all my leaders down below were trying to excommunicate me. It was kind of really weird. Also, Daniel Peterson had written this hit piece on me, and clearly the Maxwell Institute and the apologists were sending my stake president and bishop intelligence that they had gathered on me as part of the Strengthening the Members Committee, which exists in the church. And funnily enough, once I let Elder Holland and Elder Jensen know that Daniel Peterson was about to do a hit piece on me while I was helping them, they not only silenced Daniel Peterson, told him he couldn't release that essay, but they ended up firing him from the Maxwell Institute, and and renovating the Maxwell Institute, which is something I'm very proud of, that I had a part in that. Not because I have any ill will towards Daniel Peterson, but just because I think old school classic apologetics are harmful, and I think Daniel Peterson was doing harm, along with Louis Midgley, rest his soul, and Bill Hamlin, and just actually, I don't know if Louis Midgley's still alive. I guess it's Bill Hamlin that passed away. But anyway, I think old school Mormon apologetics is pretty much dead, and I think we're better off for it. Although I think the men who engage in that stuff, again, were doing the best that they could. Anyway, I don't know how much Brian Hunt kind of was equipped to be able to deal with all this, but that was my interview with Brian Hunt. And at that point, I felt I was just kind of done. I was just like, this is like the third investigation that the church has done on me. It really wears you down after a while to feel like you're trying to stay active, you're trying to stay committed. But the church keeps investigating you, keep giving you the message they don't want you. Again, my second child, Maya, was president of Laurels at the time I had this interview with Brian Hunt. My daughter Clara was president of the Beehives. Margie and I were attending. Winston had been baptized. Like, we were totally just fighting tooth and nail to stay active in the church. And here was another, the third investigation on my membership, in however many years, 8 or 9 or 10 years. I don't know how many it was, but it was just a lot. So I went back and told Margie about this interview, and we just decided that we didn't want to have any more interactions with Brian Hunt. We didn't want to participate in his investigation of me, and we wanted to just be left alone, and we didn't want to be part of an interrogation. So we sent Brian Hunt a letter saying we don't want home teachers. We don't want, and the home teachers were investigating us, so we didn't want them. Wanted to stand down to leave us alone. So we sent Brian Hunt, Bishop Hunt, an email saying no more home teachers, no more visiting teachers. We don't want to do any callings. We don't want to meet with any bishop or anyone. We just want to be left alone. And that was how we left it. So I didn't have any more talks with Brian Hunt. And again, that was around January 26, 2014.